Better late than never, huh, gang? Thanks for joining me tonight. I'm your host, Jake Roberts, here for Ghosts of Bacon podcast. See, we got some people here joining the live stream. Good to see you all. A lot of the usual faces. Thanks, gang. So, yeah, I had a late sound, and I just saw the comments. Anybody got sound, Penny? Yeah, got a late start this evening. Sorry about the hold up. However, I'm glad you could join me tonight. Before we even get started, want to make a few announcements of some of the changes that are coming here in the next few weeks, in the next month for the podcast. Obviously looking to pull in more guests, and I have a few people lined up that I think people are really going to enjoy. That's the first thing. The second thing, I'm also going to be adding the, hopefully if I can get it to work, a call-in line where people can call in with questions. The next couple of shows, I really want to open it up to questions that people have about the book. People who have read the book and you still have questions, things that were unclear, things you didn't understand. So I'm going to be opening that up. I want to say hi to Judy, Penny, Daniel, Jenny. Hey, glad you could make it. You weren't late at all. I was. Tom, always a pleasure as always. I appreciate you being here. So yeah, as people fill in, I have a few things I want to go over this evening. I want to finish up, for the most part, a large part of my discussion of the fraternity of the Rosicrucians and how they're associated with Sir Francis Bacon. And so before we get things rolling, does anyone have any, let's see. Yes, Jenny, thank you for commenting on that. I did that early on. Let me post your comment. I use StreamYard, yes, to broadcast this. And early on, I posted a link for people to join so that I could see their names on the screen. And you know what? I should probably do that once again before next time before my next podcast. Now that we're up and rolling, I'm not going to do it. But yeah, you're so right. I was remiss in doing that for the later later podcast. I'm going to redo that. I appreciate you, John, very much. Thanks for joining me. And so, yeah, a handful of comments, like I said, things that I wanted to announce, some changes coming up, and, going to try to make this little podcast I've been throwing together. I'm going to try to make it a little bit more legit. I will also be adding a channel on my my webpage, theghostsofbacon.com, with a live stream capability where people can actually go there to watch live. So that's going to be the next thing coming up. So thanks for that, Jenny. Yeah, definitely going to be posting that link once again so that people can join and make sure that they're a part of the chat here on Facebook, and we can actually see their names popping up, as well as on YouTube, on the YouTube side. Oh, Jenny, what a great comment. You mean so they come on camera with you? Yeah, I thought about doing that. The problem is, with StreamYard, I can host up to, I think, I have an account, so I can host up to 10 people, I think it is. That could be kind of fun. I was just thinking in terms of, just coordinating for people who don't have, computer access, or people who are going to be doing just regular call-in, but that could be kind of fun, actually. That might be worth doing. So thanks for that suggestion as well. Usually I was going to reserve that just for people that I was going to invite on as a guest. But, like you said, if people had access to that, what I could do is just kind of hold them off in the waiting room, if you will, and then kind of pull them into the broadcast when, we're ready to move on with that. So that'd be kind of a cool idea. I appreciate that very much. This is also the reason why, I think of the quality of the people that are members of all of these groups, whether it's the Quest of Oak Island, my group, you guys are all, every single one of you, you're thinkers. That's why you join these kinds of groups. That's why you're interested in this kind of information. And the suggestions you have, the questions you have are always top notch. And I appreciate that more than anything. One of the other things we're going to start doing too, I'm going to be inviting in guests who have an alternative point of view. Even though, listen, I with my book, The Holy Trinity Decryption, the ciphertexts have told me explicitly that, Francis Bacon claims that he used the name Shakespeare, William Shakespeare. Now, all of those kinds of things, that, and basically the message is kind of repeated multiple times. So, obviously I'm of the Francis Bacon camp when it comes to Shakespeare for obvious reasons. I read the words of the man himself. However, there are so many other theories out there as well. I would love to give them a voice and to be able to, produce their evidence as well. I've gotten messages from the De Vere camp, for example, the Oxfordians. And you know what? They have reasons for believing what they believe. A lot of their reasons are the same ones that I have, except for the actual ciphertext and the messages themselves. So I would love to give them a forum to come on and we could talk about their ideas, their evidence they have. I could share what I've discovered and what I've found. Because, since I've published the book, I have uncovered more messages from those ciphertexts that actually talk about people like Robert Devereux, the second Earl of Essex. We also have a mention of De Vere, and so, these are really important ideas to share. And so that if we all kind of pool our information and put our heads together, we'll be able to make some headway in these mysteries. And I think that is just really what this is all about. I think that's what Sir Francis Bacon was all about, is the truth, his sacred Tao, if you will. And so this evening, what I wanted to do, here's a great comment. And once again, after all, if you're going to ask a question, you have to be prepared to hear the answer. Absolutely, Tom. And here's another message from a Facebook user. Don't see their name. The methodologies may change, but the truth remains the same. Absolutely. And if that's what we're really looking for, is the truth, which has always been, my goal. I think that the idea of just having a conversation about this and looking at all of the evidence. And here's the thing, I'm open to looking at everyone else's evidence. I'm not going to dismiss it. I'm not going to just say out of hand, well, listen, I read the words of Bacon himself. I don't need to listen to what you have to say. I think that's an inappropriate stance to take. Okay. Yes. In my opinion, I have read the words of Bacon. However, if other people have, valid evidence and information that also lends more information to this mystery, then I'm more than open to it. I want them to share it. I want to give them a forum to do that. Another great comment. Yeah, Court would be an amazing guest. I'll shoot him a message on Facebook, and he's one of the people that I would love to line up and just have a conversation about all this information. Another. Here he is, a veteran Curse of Oak Island theorist. He'd be a great guest to have on the show. I agree 100%. As usual, Daniel, you're making me laugh. I'm a Bake Oxfordian. I think I pronounced that correctly. Yeah, I hear you, man. So, listen, gang, that's what I'm really all about, is the truth. And those of you who have read my book, I'm going to be having a future broadcast where I simply field questions, because a lot of people are kind of sloughing their way through it because it's a heavy read. There's a lot of flipping back and forth. Those of you who bought the Kindle version, I feel bad because it's really hard to flip back and forth in Kindle. As far as I mean, I'm not good at it. I don't. There must be a trick to it where you can flip back to the resource pages. I'm not really sure. But with a paper version, you can just kind of have all of the signature page open and the cipher simple reverse and K cipher pages tabbed, and you can kind of flip back and forth as you're reading the narrative and as it unfolds with all of the cipher messages. And that's the best way to understand the book. I couldn't figure out any other way to write it, to be honest with you, without just constantly repeating those ideas in every chapter, which would be very monotonous. And so, it's one of those things where if you are, if you are, basically really looking for the truth, you're going to, put your nose to the grindstone and kind of do that work. You know what I'm saying? And one of the things, here's a great comment too about, I agree that Court would be an excellent guest. And someone else says, Court Lindahl is great, but he will take you to task and vice versa. We go back and forth in theories for hours. Yeah, well, you know what? That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. And I would expect nothing less, from, someone like Court, who has, really solid theories. Why not? Let's just share our ideas. And if they hold up to scrutiny, then all the better. It just makes us all better. That's my thought. So yeah, I'd love to have him. And yeah, I agree, John. He goes deep. Yeah, for sure. And my problem is that I try not to, even though I guess I do, because a lot of people say, wait, you need to slow down, Jake, because we're not all up to speed on Bacon's ciphers and so on. And the fact that, they were used, for so long by so many people. And so when people are new to that kind of information, that's why I keep posting. If those of you who are here for the first time, I always keep posting my Bacon Ciphers 101 video. If you're new to the information, new to this channel, definitely check that out because it kind of gives a refresher each time before I, kind of do that. So, Facebook user states exactly that which does not kill you makes you stronger. The way I like to look at it is steel sharpens steel. So, if you have two people who have, really good information and really ask each other to stay the course and really share it in a way that's factual using sound logic, it can only make everyone better. So yeah, I agree with that. As usual, my friend Daniel, you think Bacon may have been protecting others with some of his cipher messages? It depends on what you mean by protecting. Yes, I would say that, I would say that as much as he was recording information, in a sense, he was also protecting them because he was doing it within the cipher messages. And, a lot of this information was not safe to reveal in his own time or their own time. So in that sense, yes, I would have to agree. And yes, he was definitely proficient in the art of deception. Tom, yeah, thanks for that. Listening never hurts. After all, you can't learn anything while you are talking. And that's one of the first lessons I teach my students, my friend. You have one mouth and two ears for a very good reason. You should be listening twice as much as you talk. Which is really why, with this particular podcast, what I really want to do is have more people coming in and offering their ideas instead of just me doing a presentation and doing all the talking. It's really great, because we have so many great thinkers in all of these groups, and you guys come in and you ask me these kinds of questions, make these kinds of comments in real time. And that's why it's so beneficial to me. A lot of you are sending me really great questions and great information in private messages. Also, if you haven't been reading Daniel Spinell's posts on Facebook, by the time he has them all done, if you just compile those, Daniel, you're going to have an amazing book on your hands particularly if it goes in the direction I think you're going, which I think is awesome. So, the whole thing is really pretty phenomenal for me. But like I said, I'm all about making this more about an interactive presentation and discussion than it is just me kind of presenting my research, my ideas. But I think, for now, obviously that has to be the basis of it because that's pretty much all I got. So to that end, oh, curse you, my friend John Stammer. Did your research with Bacon ever put an X on the island? Yep. All right, next question. More on that maybe next year, my friend. And when we're able to talk about that, I would really, obviously, being my friend, I would really love to come on your podcast and be the first to announce it there, and present a lot of that information when the time comes. All I can say is, I have a feeling that probably maybe by next spring or summer, I might be able to come on and do that. That's all I'm at liberty to say. Oh, wrong one. I have no interest in the art of cyber message, but I find it amazing that people are able to understand, solve it. What up, guys? Thanks, Awoken One. Yeah, that's just it. Unless you have an interest, you know what I mean? It's like, who's really going to pay attention to it? And the other thing too is, particularly with my book, when I do these presentations, I sometimes get these questions that are, come on, really? Did you really find something? It's like, well, I didn't spend 370 pages saying, I think I found something. Sorry, Judy. That's about all I could say. But all I have to say is John just gave me the okay to go on a show, and when the time comes, and buddy, you're always going to be the first. So know that. Yeah, Awoken One. The thing is that most people with this kind of information, let's face it, there's a healthy amount of skepticism, as well there should be. And I think that, in the grand scheme of things, that as people kind of start digging deep and they start to see the patterns developing, I've had an interest in this stuff for over, 30 years. And so in my amount of research, I began studying symbolism and its meanings, and universal symbolism in particular, archetypes and so on, and how that kind of affects the human psyche. And that led me down a rabbit hole into, suddenly, next thing you know, Rosicrucianism and those symbols, which led me to understanding, Bacon's ciphers and so on. And that's how I kind of tumbled down this rabbit hole and really began looking at Shakespeare's plaque in that manner. So yeah. Daniel, Tom, the survival of spies, for sure, all that's involved. So, as usual, everyone. Court's here. I hope so. That's amazing. Welcome, my friend. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share a tab here, and kind of get on with some of my current research with the fraternity of the Rosicrucians, in particular the Fama Fraternitatis and the Confessio, and RC's alchemical wedding. So when we look at a lot of this information, let me just kind of go through particularly the list of characters. This is really going to be the focus of tonight's presentation. I'll be popping back and forth in between, this presentation and our live feed of comments and posting a lot of your questions and comments. So for the time being, what I've done is tonight's presentation, I've constructed in such a way that I'm going to go through an overview of what's on tap for tonight, as well as there will be a break where we can have a question and answer after the first section, and that's pretty much how I was going to frame it. So enjoy the ride, gang. So if you're new to the cipher systems of Francis Bacon, this channel, the idea of decryption, I highly recommend looking at my previous video. As I mentioned earlier, it's called GoB 523, Bacon Ciphers 101. Kind of gives an overview of all of his ciphers that he was known to use: simple cipher, reverse, Kaye cipher, fourfold, Elizabethan short cipher. All of them are covered in that context. My last podcast a couple of weeks ago was actually about this document right here. I focused on the frontispiece and the Bacon signatures that were all over it in terms of actually writing the name of Sir Francis Bacon in cipher form on the cover of this, telling us who wrote it. And so I also talked about a lot of the various anagrams that are associated with this title here. I covered briefly the 6 articles of agreement as they were kind of outlined in the Fama. I didn't go in detail in all of them. I just went in depth in a couple that represented a lot of the ideas that Bacon was getting at here. I also discussed how CRC is Francis Bacon, the character named by these initials is naming Francis Bacon as the father of this fraternity. Now, I also talked about briefly how the date of his birth is fictitious and not to be interpreted literally. I don't think any of this document is intended to be interpreted literally. In fact, the signature of Rosicrucian is the same as King Stuart, his real name, in simple, reverse, and Kaye ciphers. And so I think that this document, everything that has to do with it, is intended to actually communicate his true heritage, who his real parents were. And so this week, what I'm going to be getting into is actually this image here at the right. I'm going to talk about this just a little bit. I didn't include the meaning and the interpretation necessarily of the full interpretation of this phrase here, dat rosa mel apibus. But there's something there. We're going to talk about the anagram of Frau Rosi Crosse. We're going to talk about the list of members. And so in this image, I asked people in one of my postings to look closely at it. I guess I left the window open. Sorry about that, gang. It's awfully comfortable in here tonight. And if you look at it closely, if we go back and down here, this little square down here, if you have a high resolution image of this, what you will see is that the web is a 7-sided web, the same as the vault of Father CRC. In addition to that, what you will also notice is that there is a 33 here, 3, and then a lighter 3 here. See this 3? In a high resolution image, it just pops. You can see it much better than this blown up version. But here you have a 33, there's a 3, and then the other 3. And then on its side, if you look here, you will see on its side a 6 and a 7. So 33 obviously is the simple cipher signature for Bacon, and 67 for Francis. So you can see who got caught in the web, in my opinion, of the De Medici family, here in the form of Francis and Bacon. Now, like I said, you can't see it quite as well in that image because it's blown up. Then what I noticed was up above it is an 8 on its side, and then what looks to be a 3, 83. So that made me curious. Well, what other numbers appear up there? Well, 83 is the name Fraters, Latin for brothers, in simple cipher. It's also King Bacon in Fourfold Cipher. So this made me curious. What else is up there? So I decided to take a closer look. And here you can see a variety of images and shapes that, frankly, are actually symbolic. It's particularly if you're thinking in terms of a merchant's mark of the time. I'm not going to delve into that tonight, but it's definitely a pretty cool study if you get into that. But what we do have is a 92 over here. And so we have 83 here, and 92 is Bacon and Fraters in reverse. So, that's pretty cool. So I think that the Rosicrucians were a product of the Bacon brothers. That's what the message is in this square. So here's what I meant about the quick stopping questions and comments. What are your thoughts on this part of the presentation so far? Ray 305. Yeah, it's there. So what are your thoughts on just this image alone? If you find a high quality image on the web of that particular image, and you zoom in, the 33 is blatant, the 67 is blatant. And if I were to be looking at that on its own, on its face, I'd say, well, okay, Jake, now listen, you've been nose deep into this Bacon stuff now for several years. Is this pareidolia? Are you just seeing what you want to see? Are you seeing shapes in the clouds here that look like a face, basically? And what I would also say is that if it was just at face value, that's exactly what I would attribute it to. If it were not in context of all of the other information that goes along with it, then I'm just going to tell you straight up, no, it's all there, and there's a lot more to look at as well. Here is, could Fraters denote brotherhood? Yes, absolutely. In fact, that's why the word frater and fraters is on the radar in the first place in terms of a signature, a cipher signature, because it comes up again and again and again. The Vulcan one, another great question, my friend. Was there a cipher system in place that Bacon used to encrypt his messages, or did Bacon and his friends create their own unique cipher system? Yes and yes, to answer the question. Such a great question. From what I understand, and again, I could be wrong, but my understanding of this information is that the Elizabethan Short Cipher system was there in existence and used by multiple people in Elizabeth's court. Bacon created his biliteral system, which is not, we're not even going into that tonight. But he also created Kaye cipher. It was indicated that, I think that he created the system of using simple and reverse cipher as a substitution system. Okay. I think that they were probably in existence and used by, say, Francis Walsingham and other intelligence operatives. But I think that he using that as a substitution at-bash system, if you will, even though it's English instead of Hebrew, was his innovation. Tom, I agree. The detail in these works is amazing. Do you think these works were all prepared by Bacon, or did he have others helping him? You know what? My first impression was, his mind is behind all of this. Absolutely 100%. I also know that he was a consummate artist. He was a master artist. And this is one of the things that I discovered through the revelations of his aliases and pseudonyms, which I'm going to be getting into in my next podcast. I'm going to talk about the formula that we can use to discern who's who. So you know what? I know he had help. I mean, Anthony was his right-hand man. He was neck deep involved in all of this as a fellow spy and his stepbrother, if you will. So when it comes to the works of art, he was such a consummate artist that I think he's responsible for the development of most of these images we see. I know that he definitely had help with other artists as well. This specific one, I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that I see his hand in this for sure. So again, Tom, great question. Chris, I'm glad you could make it, my friend. Chris Dona in the house. One of the best researchers in the biz, if you will. And yeah, Jenny, you get it. Given the number of prints with hidden numbers that are clear, is visible when you saw it. yeah, you want to think that that's a coinkydink if it happens once, right? Yeah, 100%. I agree. But the thing is that um, when you see so many of the same thing, so many examples of the same idea, popping up again in the same image, you say, okay, it's there, it's a thing. Oh, geesh. Don't ask me any easy questions, Daniel. I wouldn't expect anything less from you, my friend. Did Anthony Bacon really die when it was reported? Did you see a message about that? No, I haven't uncovered anything explicit about Anthony, but I find it very interesting and telling that Anthony Bacon reportedly died. No one seems to know where or the exact time when. Right after Robert Devereux II, Earl of Essex, was executed for the Essex Rebellion. Anthony was living in his house. He was Essex's right hand man at that point. His, for all intents and purposes, his secretary, his main man. And when Essex was executed, Anthony left and reportedly just died. I find that to be odd. I know for a fact that Sir Francis Bacon faked his own death and had a philosophical death, if you will. I would expect that Anthony did the same, but again, that's speculation. Yeah, Chris, he definitely had gotten a lot of ideas while he was in France as a teenager. When he was in court, he saw some works that were commissioned by his grandfather, Francis I, and they all had the AA symbol on them. I wonder what that's all about. So, yeah, there was a lot. It was a huge training ground for him there, for sure. So a lot of the guild coding methods actually incorporate. It's not that they necessarily made it into the Bacon codes, but the Bacon codes made it into the guild coding system. Yeah, that's one of the things that my friend Judy Rudbush and I had been kind of talking about, and looking at some of the merchants' marks and those kinds of things. They can be interpreted using, in particular, the fourfold Bacon cipher system. So here's the question that we get all the time: did Francis Bacon become the ascended master of Saint Germain? That is one of the theories out there. I have no evidence to support it or dismiss it, so I just say that that's one of the theories out there. Great question. Oh, Jenny, here's another good possibility. Yeah, one of the things that he and obviously Jenny's asking, I wonder if Frank had commissioned some of these prints and then had added his numbers to them. That's a possibility. Why not? We know that he and Anthony hired a whole group of writers in their Scrivener's operation when they came back from France. And Anthony lived in Francis's chambers there for quite a few years while they basically ran an intelligence operation, okay, out of his apartments. And so, that's entirely possible. I know that they brought in Ben Jonson and others to help do all of the work with Shakespeare as well. So, once again, great observations. Wow, you guys are throwing tons of comments at me. John, great question. Did he do this that future generations would even figure this stuff out? Yeah, 100%. I believe that with every fiber of my being. And here's why. This information was so volatile during his own time. Sir Francis Bacon's true identity was a state secret. Okay, that means that people talk about it, it's under penalty of death. Now, he wasn't the only one. You had Elizabeth's sons, which I'm going to just go ahead and announce it tonight. De Vere, and Devereux both were Elizabeth's sons by different men. Now, those are revealed in the ciphertext, which I'll dive deeply into at some point. I'll have a special edition on just Elizabeth. But the thing was, these things could not be announced in their time because it totally upset the social order of the royal succession. And so here you have Francis Bacon, who was the heir to both England or Scotland and France, and by juxtaposition, England. Okay. So this could not be revealed in his time. However, he did not want it to go unknown. And so what we have are in his books, all of the hints and the actual references to all of his cipher systems he ever used. They're all there. Even references, veiled references to his aliases can be found in all of his actual publications using his name, which he didn't start publishing under his own name until James I was King of England. So, yes. And the way he did that was, I see you wrote the word how. The way he did that was he left the clues of all of his cipher systems in his own works. He left the clues on how to unravel them on the covers, like I covered last week of the Fama Fraternitatis. And so in that, way, that was how he left all the breadcrumbs for us to find all this stuff. Yes, Woken One, far ahead of his time. Jake, was it DeVere or Risley or both? Most people believe that Elizabeth had 3 children. And I think it was DeVere, Devereux, and Risley. Right now, all I have evidence for are DeVere and Devereux. Okay, I have what I call specific evidence from the ciphertext that both of those guys were her sons from 2 different people. Now, I suspect Risley was too, because after Devereux's execution, he never spoke to Bacon again. Wouldn't even look at him. So I think that, because they were all pretty tight, all of them. And yet Elizabeth forced Bacon to be a part of Devereux's prosecution, thinking at some point they were going to try to save him somehow, but that never happened. So great questions, gang. So tell you what, let me get back at it and share this next section with you, just so I can see what you think of, a lot of this stuff. So moving on to the next part, Fra Rosicrucian itself is an anagram. And so my first thought was Fra is a abbreviated form of the name Francis, and Francis Bacon signed his name either as F, FR, or FRA in multiple instances of his letters. And so in Rosi, I saw the name or the title Roi, French for king. And then, ironically, I also saw CR and then the E at the end of Crosse as representing Rex if we substitute X for C using what's called the at-bash substitution system between simple and reverse. 3 S's, again, using the same substitution, can be read as 3 G's. In fourfold cipher, GGG equals the number 55. And so, again, the interaction between all of these cipher systems, they're intended to be used in conjunction with one another. And so 55 is actually Francis Bacon in short cipher. And so, that leaves over the O and the FRA of Francis, and Francis is already included here in the number 55. So I realized that FRA is actually an anagram for the word art, as an R, after substituting the T for the F here in the substitution system. We have a phrase, O Rex Francis Bacon, art, Roi, the French king. He referred to himself as, and other people referred to him as, Rex Francis Bacon. That was one of his secret names. And so what he's saying here is that, he was, as king, he was actually the French king. I based upon all of the work here in the Fra Rosicrucian and all of the work decryption work I've been doing with the Fama. I think that he favored the French throne. I think he wanted to be the king of France and not England, but more on that at another time. So I don't know, gang. What do you think? You know, is this a legitimate, considering all of the information I gave last time on the last broadcast, the preliminary information here and just the image, but then all of a sudden we see that we can read this as an anagram using nothing more than the substitution system. What's the thing? I guess I'm not seeing Court's post, but yes, yes. Basically, what I put forward in my book is the idea that what he was doing was the plaque at Holy Trinity Church was not the only place where he embedded all of these secrets. It's in the Fama, it's in the Confessio. And it's in the first folio in particular. I think that once we really I start digging deeply, using a lot of these same methods with the first folio and following the clues that are there, where we're going to really see an explicit story unfold. And I think that it's, like you said, analogous to a running theme. He did it in terms of redundancy, if you will. The idea keeps being repeated in multiple sources, in multiple ways, in particular in just the plaque itself. Every single key that I use to unlock a transposition cipher revealed the same story. So regardless which one you used, you're going to see the message. And that's just one source. It was encoded in the coat of arms of the de Medici family that I attribute to Francis Bacon, that I talked about in a previous podcast. And so, yeah, it's all about redundancy, making sure that at some point, like John had asked earlier on, is someone going to pull this out in later times? Yeah, he made sure of it. And that was just one of the ways he did it. Jenny, any idea when he created the ciphers or how old he was when he created them? Yeah, he created the biliteral cipher when he was 16 years old. And the biliteral cipher is the forerunner of our binary system that we use in computers today. And so from the time that he was in France, from the time that he was 16 until he came back to England at 18 when Sir Nicholas Bacon died, leaving him nothing in his will, by the way. All of these different kinds of things. There's a whole span of time in there where I think he was just really working on a complex cipher system and here's the thing about a good cipher system. It has to be complex enough where your enemies can't figure it out, and also what he believed was when they look at it, they shouldn't even know that there's a cipher there. Okay. In other words, that's why he uses transposition ciphers. It looks like a regular message. It sounds like a convoluted message, but it's a message. And people don't know that there's actually a cipher in it. If you have, a whole, series of weird symbols and so on, then it's really pretty obvious that, there's a cipher there. So that the cryptanalysis would go to work on it, right? So, I think that he did that, in his late teens and early 20s is when he really put all of this together. And again, that's my best guess at this point. Awoken one, given the Bacon and Shakespeare connection, I'm starting to understand why there are scholarships awarded to students who do study Shakespeare. Thanks, man. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, that's just it. When you talk to Shakespeare scholars in particular, and Bacon scholars in particular, they always hint at knowing a little bit more than what they actually are willing to talk about. And that's one of the things that I've always tried to avoid. I try to be very, very transparent about not just the methods I use, but actually the explicit messages that I've uncover as I go. And so I really want to be transparent about all of that. And and if people are able to pick apart the methods I use, great. Go ahead, point out my mistakes, and let me refine them and make them better. Uh, but I think that because most people kind of scratch the surface in terms of how the ciphers work. They look at either simple cipher or they look at reverse cipher, and they just simply see a signature here and there, and they say, "Oh, there it is, there it is, there's the hint." Uh, those are hints that are meant to be followed, okay? And you continue to unravel and you tumble down that rabbit hole until you crack the entire message. All of those hints that people have been picking up on over the years, from Ignatius Donnelly on down, I think that they were very good at picking up on all of those signals. As far as actually putting them all together and seeing where they led, I don't think a lot of people did that. And those that did, they didn't reveal their methods, and they didn't share the entire message. So that's my take on it. Thanks for that, Awoken One. Great comments tonight, gang. You guys are just awesome. Put Daniel's question up on there for a second. I want to take a swig of water. Do you believe that Bacon was the creator of the movement, or did he bring it from the dark to the light? The movement ultimately, I think, was the exaltation of the individual. Okay, individualism and the power of the individual. I really think that's what it was. He harkens back to the idea of a representative form of government of the ancient Greeks and then the ancient Romans, right before they devolved into an empire. And then, of course, you have the Dark Ages, in which all of these truths kind of disappeared. And I think that what he was doing was he was picking up on that trail of light. I think he repackaged it and tried to present it to the world in a way that it was ready to accept, if that makes sense. This is why modern Freemasonry today believe that their heritage goes all the way back to the building of the Temple of Solomon in ancient Egypt. Well, everyone. That truth is geometry. That truth is building. It's architecture. It's all of the things that go into that science. Okay, and that word itself, science, light, truth, and so that's really what their heritage is in that sense. And I think what he was doing was he was repackaging it for what he believed was going to be a burgeoning age that was going. One of the phrases he used was that Europe was giving birth, and he was giving birth to an idea. And I think it was the beginnings of individual freedom, is my own personal opinion. So I think he was a creator of that movement of that time. That's my own personal opinion, yes. I think it's telling that the first folio was dedicated to William and Philip Herbert, the nephews of Philip Sidney. Philip Herbert was married to the daughter of Edward de Vere. Yeah, this was a family affair. The Sidneys were very much involved. For a time, I was toying with the idea that that Mary Sidney was actually Elizabeth's oldest child, but Edward de Vere was. And that's not to say that maybe Mary Sidney is not. I had reasons why, and that is speculation on my point. Mary Sidney is involved very much so, in particular when you have, certain works dedicated to her and so on. So I find that very interesting as well. Great comment. Jenny, once again, another great question. So did the ciphers grow in complexity congruent to when he created them? Yeah, I think so. One of the things that when Chris Dona was on my podcast and he talked about, we have this sort of speculation. I call it a speculation on my point. A lot of people think that the plate of Sir Francis Drake is actually real and not a fraud. I believe that it was a later fabrication that was based upon an original that looked exactly like that. That's my own personal opinion. Uh, Based upon the symbolism and the way it was constructed, and a lot of the Baconian ciphers that Christone and I found on it. And so um, the way Chris commented on it, and Chris, if you want to throw up a comment, I'll post it up here on the screen. But he commented that the Drake plaque was basically the complexity of Bacon's ciphers at the age of 18 or 17 or whatever, as opposed to the plaque on Holy Trinity Church in Shakespeare's funerary monument was his work in his 50s. And that's how complex it became over time. So again, yeah, I believe so. I believe so. It's a great question. Um, all right. Correct, Jake. It's in many sources, many writings that Bacon published. So, also found in his influence on the First Folio, 1611, King James Bible, King James Version Bible. Absolutely, yeah. It's all over the place. Um, and yes, it's exactly what I've been contending this entire time. It was only meant for future readers, but also his peers that were quote unquote club members. I love the way you phrase that. Yeah, 100%. And the idea is that eventually people like us would all kind of put our heads together, and we'd start to unravel the mystery and say we found answers. Not all of the answers, but we're finding answers. um, yeah, Chris just mentioned that not everyone could read back then, and so just um, the idea that it was put in writing in the first place. Yeah. Oh gosh, you guys are too good. Makes me wonder if other works with odd grammar errors written by others had messages too. Yeah, some of them do, Jenny. Some of them do. And when it comes to Bacon's works in particular, and the works of his aliases, when you see these kinds of little mistakes, like I talked about on the last podcast, of the weird place to hyphenate fraternitatis, for example. Um, those are indications or clues that there's something there, right? Um, and so, uh, yeah, other people who, like the last commenter, people that were in his club, they would have done. Um, and yeah, Ray, what's in a name? A rose by any name would smell as sweet now, wouldn't it? So, yeah, John, Awoken is definitely on the spot, always is. Um, oh, here's a cool comment. Look at this. I think it is interesting that Donnelly was from Minnesota and had written a book involving Norse culture, i.e., Ragnarok. He was still alive when the Kensington rune was found, but never commented on it. He was also a member of the Order of Good Templars. Isn't that interesting? Funny how um, I would like to point out that I've broken the rules of people who find these messages. There's an unwritten rule, if you will, that anyone who discovers the fraternity of the Rosicrucians, um, that they're supposed to keep it to themselves, and then they're supposed to honor it through the creation of a piece of art or literature that somehow alludes to the truth in a certain way. I didn't do that. Others have, in particular, Alexander Dumas, um, in the Count of Monte Cristo, in The Man in the Iron Mask. He alludes to certain truths. Mark Twain does it. Edgar Allan Poe did it. These were all people in the know. A lot of the Renaissance artists will allude to these ideas. A lot of people right now are thinking the name Poussin, for example. Um, and I think that's what they did. However, I what I did was by writing the book that I wrote and the next one I'm writing right now. Um, I think people need to know the true heritage and the true truth of the life of who this guy is that we call Sir Francis Bacon. So, um, I'm going along with what Sir William Raleigh wrote. It wasn't Sir Dr. William Raleigh wrote in Manus Verum Meliani, the all of the verses that honored the memory and legacy of Sir Francis Bacon from his contemporaries. Um, he said that someday someone will actually tell the truth about Francis Bacon and everything he did. And I don't know. I'm just trying to add to that skein of truth, if you will. Um, um, yes, Jenny. All of these are autobiographical. The name Bacon itself was not his real name, so a rose by any other name. He was a rose, um, and it's one of those things where um, if you Rose is actually an anagram with one substitution of G for S of regio, which means king or rule in the sense of a verb. Okay. So a ruler by any other name. Um, I think that's exactly what he was alluding to. Same thing with to be or not to be. If you haven't seen my post on Facebook regarding the breakdown of that in terms of its cipher values, um, he's basically talking about his true identity and also using his name Bacon. Um, so again, all of his soliloquies were definitely autobiography. A lot of the plays in certain sections were. I mean, I could do a whole podcast or probably a series of podcasts on how um, the play, "The Tragedy of Prince Hamlet of Denmark," is autobiographical in a couple of senses for sure. So, yeah, I agree. The conversation is really getting good. Hey, Michelle, I'm glad you could make it. Thanks for coming. Um, Oh, here's a great one. Something I want to deal with. If the conspiracy theory that Elizabeth and Robert Dudley were the real parents of Francis, were parents of Bacon, then Philip Sidney and his sister, Mary Sidney Herbert, Countess of Pembroke, would have been Bacon's first cousin. Um, that's true. Uh, however, um, other people would have been his cousins as well. And the problem is that I haven't found any direct evidence of that. And so, this was the theory that I was always in favor of. I was always in favor of the Prince Tutor theory and that it was Bacon. However, as I followed the evidence, what I discovered was that Bacon did write it, but he was not Elizabeth's son. He was Mary Queen of Scots' son. So, yeah, yeah. But one of the things I've discovered is that there is this circle. What I believe is, and again, this is conjecture on my part still at this point, but I think that the RC actually stands for royal cousins. These were all people who were all cousins, but many of them were either illegitimate or they were not, for whatever reason, allowed to ascend the throne. And so we'll get more into that a little bit later on. But yeah, great comment. Maybe. It's very obscure, and again, I don't want to say anything definitive about that, Daniel, but uh, it's a brief mention, and it's really weird. So I haven't done anything with it yet. I haven't been able to get that message to do what I call. I haven't been able to make it tie out, if you will. But when I do, you're going to be one of the first people to know for sure. Uh, wow, great questions, gang. While all the literature works out there by Bacon, our research is confident that all of Bacon's works are available, or has some of his literature been lost or kept hidden? Um, there was a huge collection that was just found a while back and auctioned off. A lot of stuff's been unpublished. It's not necessarily that it's been hidden; it's that Raleigh didn't get around to publishing all of it, or he didn't think it was worth publishing, or he just kind of set it aside. So, um, one of the things that he comments in Manus Verulamiani is that when it comes to the verses that Bacon left unpublished, as well as the people about him wrote about him, that he kept a lot of the best ones off to the side and didn't publish them. So, it's really pretty interested. interesting in that sense. So great question. Matt asking, was Michael Meyer an alias? I haven't come across that one yet. Matt, someone actually, oh, great little logo there. I like your, very cool. So I haven't come across Michael Meyer yet. Someone had posted a question on Facebook earlier this evening, on my run up to this show tonight, about his aliases, and if the formula that he used produces a hit, could it be a false hit just due to coincidence? And the answer to that question, of course, is yes. What I require is context in order for it to make sense, as well as the other thing too about the formula is it's not purely mathematical and alphanumeric in nature. There's also an element to it that involves Greek mythology, and so I'm going to be getting into that in my next presentation. John, yeah, nobody wants to see that. Trust me. Although if I could be like the vice president or the president's son and sell my first painting for $500,000, well, might be something into that. I'm not sure. Let's see. Yeah, recurring themes for sure. Oh, geez. Yeah. Do I ever use mapping methodologies in my research? And if so, how? To the extent where what I try to do is create a timeline in that sense. And what when it comes to in particular, when it comes to some of the aliases and pseudonyms I've uncovered, I don't do what I'm guessing what you mean by back mapping. I don't do it in the traditional sense. What I do is I use the methodologies that the clues say to follow, which, like I said, I'll be getting into in my next podcast. And then based upon that, I go back to see if the timeline fits and if it makes sense that way. So to that extent, yeah, but that's the only way I really use it at this point. It might be something worth checking into later on. So I love the suggestion. Thank you for that. Chris, I did find more evidence of D in the plaque. I can't post an image of it here though. Well, hey, listen, man, I'll send you the link. You can pop in if you want. We can kind of save the rest of my presentation for later if you want. Everyone seems to be really on a great roll here with the questions. Daniel, the New Atlantis, that's a couple of episodes in itself. Yeah, Michelle, this is what I'm working on right now with him having so many aliases. Wonder how much is still out there to be found. I know of at least 6 or 7 aliases, which is rather appropriate because that's F and G in simple cipher. And yeah, context is everything. Yeah, Tom, all of the answers are in the swamp. So, hey, John, thanks so much. And so, yeah, there's one quick last little sec. Great comments and great questions, guys. Thanks so much for joining. We could at some point we need to do just I want to do a straight up question and answer session where everyone just kind of pops in. Jenny had the great suggestion of just posting the link of how to join StreamYard here, and then just kind of pop in and join the conversation. It would be wonderful to have a roundtable discussion. Jake, what is your name in simple cipher? My last name is 92. All right, so first name Jacob would be 29, total 121. So I think that's funny. So, all right, sharing the last section. If you want to stay with me, go ahead, gang. And I have another little question and answer here at the end after this section as well. And we'll wrap things up here. It's been one of my longer podcasts for sure, but you guys are just, pretty awesome. You're really killing it here with the questions. So here we have the list of characters that are listed in the Fama. And so throughout my investigation, each one of these in a different way can represent Francis. Now, last week I talked about how IA is 9-1, which is 91. That's the simple cipher signature for Anthony, his stepbrother. But in a variety of ways, it could also represent Francis as king. And so, while I was going through this, I wanted to include, look for the names of Anthony, Robert Devereux, Edward de Vere, Charles de Valois, Sir Walter Raleigh, for example. He's an important player. Maybe he's R right here. Who knows? And so what I decided to do was to take all of these so-called characters as letters and add them together using Bacon's cipher systems to see what the totals told me. And so by looking at the values of the individual letters and totaling them all in each of the varied cipher systems and see what the total would tell me in all of these ciphers. So I rearranged the letters for the purposes of understanding them in fourfold cipher, because the way fourfold cipher works is that if you have more than one, suppose you have a C in one place, a C in another, C in there, you take all of them together and you have three C's together. That has a specific value. And so by arranging the letters in that manner, it's easier to calculate the values in fourfold. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you a section in the chapter of my next book on the RC. And so I'm going to switch over to my Word doc here, which means I have to pop out of this. And so if I scroll up here, you'll see what I did. And so if we take all of the letters of all of these characters and I arrange them here in this column, and as they repeat, you'll see I strung all of the C's together, and 3 C's in fourfold cipher equals 51, if you can see this here on the screen. And so that's what I did, and I ended up with these totals at the bottom, which I'm going to be going over here in the next screen. But I just wanted to give you an image of what that looked like in table form. So I'm hoping that this is coming through. And so so when we look at the values, this is what happens, gang. And once again, if you're familiar with what I've been doing, impossible dropped out of my vocabulary a long time ago. So you guys are going to kind of see what happens here. The short cipher, Elizabethan short cipher, total was 108, which we all know is actually Francis in reverse cipher. It's Francois in simple cipher. Simple cipher total of 198 is actually the sum of the characters of Rex Francois III in reverse cipher. The reverse cipher of 352 at first kind of had me confused, but it's basically Rex Francis Bacon in K cipher, also Sir Francis Bacon in cipher. Strangely enough, it's Francis Valentin Andreae in fourfold cipher. So I would consider that a hit. Now, here's the one that was really confusing, 536. And my first interpretation was to just translate it into letters, and it could actually be read as XF, which would actually mean ek means out of, or excuse me, ek means these names or these persons named here. X means out of, and F, of course, would be Francis. But it's also the the signature or the number of Francis Stuart Bacon in Kaye cipher. So all of these things, are really pretty interesting, except for that very last number of 369. And I'll tell you what, this took some figuring out. There are no known signatures that are 369 for associated with Sir Francis Bacon, but I realize it's the magic constant in the 9 by 9 magic square you see here that was published by Cornelius Agrippa. And this is someone that Francis Bacon really admired and followed his work years later. And so, if you're not familiar, a magic square, regardless of what direction you add up the numbers, and whatever the column is, whatever the row, even diagonally, the total is going to be 369. And so the idea that you could create a square that would do this with this number of places, Agrippa, when he publishes, says, "Yeah, I can do it up to 9 places." It's kind of a bragging rights thing. But he also, in his publication, associated each of his magic squares with the 7 known planetary bodies, and the 9 by 9 square is associated with Luna, which of course is the moon. Later, I realized it's also the total of the letters I, King Francois Stuart III, in Kaye cipher. So it took me a while to kind of unravel that. But the idea of the magic constant and the magic squares I found fascinating, especially since they were associated with the 7 known planetary bodies, because it turns out that that was one of the clues that Manly Palmer Hall gave in The Secret Teachings of All Ages of what the answer would be to the mystery of Bacon's aliases. So obviously I'll be going into that a little bit later next month, maybe. So I also realized that there's a relationship between different signatures that total 369. And what it was the name of what his names of what they would be if he were king of either France or of England, if you add them together. And so the two possibilities of what his names would be. So the first example of 369 is 175 plus 194. 175 is Francois Stuart in simple and in reverse, by the way. It's the same in both. And so this is what his name would have been in France. But if he were to be the English king, indicated by the name Francis Stuart III, that's 194. So it identifies his French identity if he was the king of England. Now, please do not post comments that this would not have been his name if he was his title in England, because he would have been Francis I. But this is an indication that he has used throughout the cipher systems to indicate kingship. He was Francis III. So another version is 202 plus 167, other Bacon signatures. So in this version, 202 is Francois Stuart III in simple, which would have been his name were he king of France. 167 is multiple instances, but in simple cipher, it happens to be Francis Stuart, what his name would be in England if he were not king, but he had his real name. So again, if he were the Roi Francois, his name in England would have been Francis Stuart. So here are my conclusions, gang, based upon all of these different things that have come up. I think that Anthony and Francis wrote the Fama and Confessio. Now, a lot of scholars don't believe that the same person wrote the Alchemical Wedding that wrote those two. I think Francis wrote that on his own, under the alias that I mentioned last week. So the sole purpose of these publications were to record and announce the truth amongst the people in his group, what his real identity was. And also, I think that the list of names also gives a list of succession of who really was in line, whether they were a legitimate son of a king or not. In particular, I'm thinking of Charles de Valois. What the line of succession really should be in between France and England. And so the other members of his group, they would read that. At some point, someone leaked it. I think that this is what Andrea meant when he called it a ludibrium, which is what I talked about last week, as a plaything of the winds. I think that Francis and Anthony were just kind of passing this around to the royal cousins and saying, "Hey, gang, Francis is number one. The rest of you you all need to get in line, okay? And the line is long." And so I think that that's what it really started out as until it was released. And at that point, suddenly people started really reading it literally, taking it as recorded history, thinking that there really was this guy named Christian Rosicrucians, which is, just silly, I think. But I think that's what happened. And as a result, people began to think of this secret order as a real thing. And I think that Bacon saw this an opportunity to allow it to evolve into what we consider to be speculative Freemasonry today. And so, he didn't release the ciphertext. He just left clues, like I said, in different places, like a lot of your comments and questions alluded to, so that eventually someday someone later would unravel this all, later on. Now, one ciphertext that I've kind of unraveled refers to this idea of the origins of Freemasonry. But like I said, that's going to be discussed at another time. So next time on Ghosts of Bacon, I'm going to give a final quick installment of the Rosicrucians. There's just one last little piece of the puzzle that I want to throw out there for your consideration to see what your thoughts are. In other words, Sancti Spiritus, where is this place? What is the house of the Holy Spirit? And what does that even allude to? What does it mean? I think I might have an answer to that in a couple of weeks. So the other thing I'm going to talk about in that episode is what I just alluded to throughout this podcast, is the formula for calculating and confirming the aliases of Sir Francis Bacon. So that's what's on tap for next time, gang. What are your thoughts? Yeah, John or Jenny. Yeah, 100%. He killed it at Sudoku. So just kind of going through the comments that I missed while I was publishing, or kind of going through. Thanks, John. Thanks, guys. Awesome one. The fact that I know what you're talking about kills me. That would be awesome if I could get away with that, but they'd probably tear it down or take it down for copyright infringement. You know how they are. So in the Magic Square, the same number never gets used twice. Yeah, Tom. And the fact that, they were playing around with these ideas, they were actually coming up with them in ancient Greece, and playing around with it. And I think just like our own intelligence operatives do today, they pay top dollar if anyone were to, well, not top dollar, but a lot of money if anyone actually discovers a new prime number. The reason is prime numbers are also a great way to create ciphers, okay, and cipher systems. Bacon used a lot of prime numbers in his own. And so I think by using the Magic Square constants, along with maybe there was a device that he used to create his own, but when we get into the aliases in a couple of weeks, I think that all of you are going to think that's really pretty cool. So great, gang. Thanks so much. Oh, hey, Jeff. Good to see you, man. Looking down through the comments. Thanks, Penn. And you're on my same brainwave, Jenny. Decrypting the plaque and finding out his true identity. That was the key piece to the puzzle that really started unraveling everything. Suddenly, everything made sense. Suddenly, anagrams, with the Fra Rosicrucians started to make sense, because up until that point, I was coming up with stuff. None of it made sense in context. And the idea that Rex Francis. I'm like, okay, yeah, I know he called himself Rex Bacon and stuff like that, but nothing else was tying out. But the other thing too, I think that that was one of the key pieces, is that the idea of individual freedom, was really, really key. Was he Christian, Catholic? Ray, great question. Yeah, Bacon was raised as a devout Protestant. Okay, the Bacons were staunch anti-Catholic, staunch anti Mary Queen of Scots because of that, and because of other reasons, obviously. And so, yeah, it's on record that he was a very devoted Christian. And so, when we consider that in context with some of the other things that people have talked about in terms of Rosicrucianism and all those kinds of things, I don't think Rosicrucianism is what everyone thinks it is. And I think that it was basically misinterpreted in a literal sense, as opposed to the symbolic and allegorical sense that he intended. Yeah, that's right. His book, The Last Symbol, based on the magic square. I think that one was on the base 3 or 4 magic square. So it starts at base 3 and works its way all the way up to, which is adds up to 15, and then it goes all the way up to 369 with a 9x9. Yeah, Dan Brown used it as well. Ray, yes, primes. Luckily, I didn't turn that into a drinking game tonight like I did my very first appearance on John's podcast. Every time I said prime, everyone had to drink. So, any other questions or thoughts, gang? It went long tonight. This is probably due to all of your amazing comments and questions. Went longer than I normally do, but I think this is one for the books here. You guys did a great job, bringing out some really great information. Just going to go ahead and give you a minute. Cheers to you, my friend. Yeah, Jenny, here's something that I've been thinking, is that, suddenly, you have this idea of a society that's not just based upon enlightenment and based upon this idea of individual freedom, but also the idea of based upon your own worth, what you are able to create in and of your own self. The idea that you can be the master of your own destiny. The idea that the United States, was originally founded upon. That was this what he had in mind in his New Atlantis, based upon his own experience of the idea of divine right and birthright, and what was denied him. Did that leave a bitter pill in his mouth? It had to be a bitter pill to swallow. And so this idea of your own merit, this idea of making your own way based upon your own abilities, and he had exceptional abilities. So yeah, I could see that for sure. I think that's a great question. Hey, thanks, Daniel. Appreciate it very much. Thanks, Dawn. Oh, Tom, come on now. Your head doesn't hurt that bad. So, and we'll leave it on this. Individual freedom is a core Freemason tenet. Absolutely it is. So, listen, people, thanks for hanging with me, all of you. You hung tough tonight for an hour and a half. I appreciate you all very much. And thanks for sticking with. And as usual, thanks, Awoken One. Appreciate it. The rabbit hole always goes deeper, my friend. And we're not done yet. So listen, gang, any other comments or questions, leave them below on Facebook. Go ahead and post them on YouTube. I answer everything. Hey, Chris, yeah, thanks so much. It was a great conversation. Appreciate you guys very much. So, all right, we're going to end it here. 8:33. 33. Love it. Have a great night, gang. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate it. Take care.